Good evening, I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. On the NewsHour tonight, President Trump restricts travel from 19 countries, reviving a policy from his first term that will once again leave thousands in limbo.
Germany's chancellor visits the White House at a time when Europe's alliance with the U.S. is fracturing.
And the Republican tax cut and spending bill could add trillions to the already massive national debt. We examine how the country arrived at such a precarious financial position.
As things stand now, we owe about as much as all the other large advanced economies put together.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
moving our economy for 160 years. BNSF, the engine that connects us.
Friends of the NewsHour, including Robert S. Kaplan and Wendy J. Selden through the Raymond James Charitable Endowment Fund. Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. An extraordinary feud erupted into public view today between President Donald Trump and his one-time ally Elon Musk, with Mr. Trump saying he was very disappointed in Musk for criticizing the GOP's massive domestic policy bill. That's as President Trump today also defended his sweeping new travel ban on citizens from 12 different countries and restricting entry from 7 more.
The president claims it will protect U.S. national security. The ban mostly affects people from Africa and the Middle East and will take effect on Monday. White House correspondent Laura Barone-Lopez has our report.
Pointing to Sunday's violent attack in Boulder, Colorado, President Trump unveiled his new travel ban last night.
The recent terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, has underscored the extreme dangers posed to our country by the entry of foreign nationals who are not properly vetted.
Banning citizens from 12 countries from entering the United States and restricting access for 7 other countries. Trump claimed it's necessary to prevent terror attacks.
Very simply, we cannot have open migration from any country where we cannot safely and reliably vet and screen those who seek to enter the United States.
On the list, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. While citizens from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela face heightened restrictions for entry. Notably not on the list, Egypt. That despite Trump using the Boulder suspect, who is an Egyptian national, as justification for his actions. During a visit with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in the Oval Office today, Trump defended his decision to leave Egypt off the list.
Egypt has been a country that we deal with very closely. They have things under control. The countries that we have don't have things under control.
There are some key exemptions in place, including for those who are dual citizens, legal residents, refugees or asylum grantees already in the U.S., and athletes traveling for events like the World Cup and Olympics. At JFK Airport in New York City, some said the policy seemed short-sighted.
We seem to be isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. So wherever we draw back, I think the Chinese and other countries kind of fill in the gap. which is not good for, from my point of view, not good in the long term.
The new travel ban is significantly larger in scope than the executive order issued during the early days of the first Trump administration. That policy banned citizens from predominantly Muslim countries like Iraq, Syria, Iran, Sudan, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen. After a chaotic implementation and legal challenges, the Supreme Court upheld a version of the ban in 2018. Despite waiting more than 4 months to issue it, Trump said that his travel ban can't come soon enough.
We're not stopping until we get them out.
But the president didn't linger on the new policy, instead focusing more on the precarious future of his budget bill and the economy.
We have almost perfect inflation. Grocery prices are down, everything. Remember eggs? Eggs have come down 400%. Everybody has eggs now.
Egg prices have decreased since peaks earlier this winter, but it's closer to a 61% drop, not 400%. Wholesale prices for businesses have dropped, but economists say the impact of Trump's tariff policies will likely drive them up again later this summer. And Trump lashed out at former advisor Elon Musk.
But I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
This week, Musk publicly criticized the president's tax bill, calling it a disgusting abomination.
Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here, better than you people. He knew everything about it. He had no problem with it. All of a sudden he had a problem, and he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate.
Musk quickly responded on his social media platform X, saying, whatever, Republicans can get rid of the Biden-era tax credit for electric vehicles as long as they ditch the mountain of disgusting pork in the bill. Musk's attacks didn't end there, posting, without me, Trump would have lost the election. Dems would control the House, and the Republicans would be 51-49 in the Senate. Within hours, the president took to his own platform, Truth Social, saying Musk went crazy and that the easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. The mutually beneficial relationship between two of the most powerful men in the world appears to be over. Musk dropping what he called a really big bomb about alleged ties between the president and convicted sex offender and financer Jeffrey Epstein. Musk said, Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Some conspiracy theorists believe the government is hiding information about the death of Epstein. The Trump administration released a first phase of documents earlier this year. As the president and Elon Musk continue their public fight on social media, Tesla's stock price plunged this afternoon, dropping 14%. And shares in Trump Media and Technology Group, the Truth Social parent company, also took an 8% hit. Amna?
Laura, let's pick up where you left off there in the feud between the president and Elon Musk that is escalating by the minute. What's the latest on that?
So this fight carried on for hours, Amna, and Musk posted again on his social media platform X saying that he will immediately decommission his Dragon spacecraft. That's the only U.S. option for delivering the crew to and from the International Space Station. Elon Musk continued amplifying a post calling for the president's impeachment, and he also said that the president's tariffs will, quote, cause a recession in the second half of the year. Now, President Trump fired back on Truth Social, saying that he didn't mind that Elon Musk turned on him, but said that Musk should have done it months ago. So this ongoing fight exploding today, less than a week after Elon Musk and Donald Trump were in the Oval Office saying their goodbyes.
Or is any of this going to have an impact on the president's budget bill that he's trying to push through right now?
So the president and the Republican Senate leadership can only lose 3 votes in the Senate. But some sources close to the White House said that the bill was in a tough spot as of this morning, but that they think that this fight between Elon Musk and the president could actually have a rallying effect for the president. Essentially, Republicans rallying around the president. As for the relationship between the two men, a source close to the president said that they think that the president's threats about canceling those government contracts that Musk's businesses have with the government, that's a very real threat, and that ultimately Musk could end up being attacked and targeted in the way that the president has attacked his other perceived enemies.
Let's turn back to that travel ban you were reporting on. We heard the president talk about the national security interests here. What more do we know about the reasoning behind these countries targeted in the ban?
We spoke to Simon Hankinson, a Heritage Foundation worker who also worked at the State Department for more than 2 decades. And he argued that this ban was really about cracking down on visa overstays and the refusal of countries to take back their nationals, which the DHS said as well, that essentially they're trying to pressure countries to take deportation flights of their citizens. Now, Hankinson argued that he doesn't think this ban is going to have that big of effect on students and talent coming to the U.S. because of the fact that the countries affected don't include India and China, which are some of the countries that immigrants come from the most to the U.S. for studying. It's important to note, though, Amna, that in the president's order and as well as the president's statements, he has repeatedly said that this is about combating terrorism and to prevent national security threats.
And on that point, you reported on that. The president cited the Boulder attack. The suspect in that case is from Egypt. Egypt is not on this list. What are the facts that we know about terrorist attacks that are committed by people from these countries on the ban list?
I spoke to Alex Narastra, and he's with the Cato Institute. He and his team analyzed the actual number of immigrants and the threats from immigrants who come from these banned countries over the last 50 years.
Since 1975, only one person has been murdered in a terrorist attack on U.S. soil committed by somebody from one of these banned countries. These bans are more about the president flexing his power and trying to reduce immigration to the United States by first going after countries that aren't that important. Frankly, that don't send that many people to the United States. And then I think we'll slowly see him add countries to the list over time.
This ban potentially affects thousands of people, including a young girl from Afghanistan. And we're calling her Syra, blurring her face and altering her voice to protect her identity for her safety. She spoke to producer Zeba Varsi from Peshawar in neighboring Pakistan, where she traveled for her U.S. visa appointment. And now she doesn't know where to go.
As an Afghan student, we cannot study in our country. I waited for 1 year to complete this process. The applying for university in the United States is not easy.
Despite her best efforts, Syra feels abandoned again.
Although I have successfully obtained a student visa for this fall semester, but this new policy giving me anxiety.
Before the Taliban took over in 2021, she was a first-year journalism student at Kabul University with big dreams. But the Taliban crushed them. For the last 4 years, they've banned women and girls from school and from most of public life. But Syra didn't give up. She fought against the Taliban by protesting in Kabul. And last year, she applied to 11 colleges in the U.S. and got accepted to 5. This fall, she was all set to attend a college in Pennsylvania to study political science.
I really want to study political science because I want to work on Afghanistan politics area, especially for women's rights in Afghanistan. My only goal is to use this opportunity in the United States, use the United States education only to serve for my country, serve for women like me who are suffering right now. Who are banned for education, who cannot have their basic rights.
Syra is in neighboring Pakistan, where she traveled with her family for her U.S. student visa appointment. But with the many uncertainties around travel restrictions on Afghan nationals like her, she's worried for her future.
What I will do, how I can return back to home, where the Taliban, if they know that I came to Peshawar, Pakistan for use visa or for my continuing my education to use, they would probably tell me or do something to me. Currently, my only hope is in United States, and I hope they hear our voices and know our concern that we are relying on your country and your education.
Amna, the White House told NewsHour that a student like Syra would be able to enter the United States because she was already issued her visa before the president issued this proclamation just last night. But still, students like Syra are very anxious right now because of the president's larger crackdown on foreign national students like her.
All right, Laura Barone-Lopez reporting as usual. Wonderful reporting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another issue being discussed at the White House today, the war in Ukraine. During their meeting in the Oval Office, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz urged President Trump to increase pressure on Russia. But Mr. Trump made no such commitments and instead compared Ukraine and Russia to two fighting children who need to work out their differences. Nick Schifrin reports.
Today in the Oval Office, an attempt to tie the U.S. to Europe by family.
This is the birth certificate of Donald Trump's grandfather, born in 1869, close to Bad Dürkheim.
The U.S. support of Western Europe against the Nazis is a reason for the U.S. to side with Ukraine.
May I remind you that we are having June 6 tomorrow. This is D-Day anniversary, when the Americans once ended a war in Europe.
That was not a pleasant day for you?
No, that was not a pleasant. This was the liberation of my country from Nazi dictatorship.
That's true.
America is again in a very strong position to do something on this war and ending this war. We are looking for more pressure on Russia.
But more than 3 years after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, President Trump today suggested the war should maybe continue.
Sometimes you see two young children fighting like crazy. They hate each other and they're fighting in a park. And you try and pull them apart. They don't want to be pulled. Sometimes you're better off letting them fight for a while and then pulling them apart. There's some additional fighting that's going to go on.
President Trump also said he hadn't read a bipartisan bill sponsored by Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal that would impose sanctions on Russia and its trading partners. And any future sanctions could be imposed both on Russia and Ukraine.
When I see the moment where it's not going to stop, and I'm sure you're going to do the same thing, will be very, very, very tough. And it could be on both countries, to be honest. You know.
Merz became chancellor of a center-right coalition last month. He's promised to help Ukraine build its own weapons and increase Germany's defense spending to 5% of gross domestic product. That's the same goal NATO defense ministers negotiated today in Brussels to spend 3.5% on defense plus 1.5% on infrastructure. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said NATO members had no choice.
We're here to continue the work that President Trump started, which is a commitment to 5% defense spending across this alliance, which we think will happen, which we think has to happen by the summit at The Hague later this month.
But not all of NATO's 32 countries are on board. Spanish Defense Minister Margarita Robles.
We think we are able to accomplish these capability targets for Spain with the 2% of GDP.
U.S. officials say those plans, endorsed today, born from estimates that Russia's rebuilding its defense industrial base for war beyond Ukraine. NATO hopes to be able to deploy 300,000 troops to Eastern Europe within 6 months should Russia attack. The U.S. currently has 80,000 troops based in Europe and could reduce that number, Hegseth hinted today.
So there are reasons why we have troops in certain places, and we respect and understand that. It was also prudent that we review that force posture in real time alongside our allies and partners to make sure it's right-sized.
But NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte expressed confidence in the U.S.'s European presence given the threat posed by Russia.
We all know we will be safe for the next couple of years, but then we need to use those years to learn Russian if we don't do this.
Today, it is only Ukraine preventing Russia's advance. A defense official tells PBS NewsHour this weekend's attack by Ukrainian drones destroyed about a dozen Russian bombers and damaged about a dozen more. That's less than Ukraine's public estimate. In their phone call yesterday, President Trump warned Russian President Vladimir Putin not to respond.
I said, don't do it. You shouldn't do it. You should stop it. But again, there's a lot of hatred.
Merz hoped to convince President Trump today to pressure Russia. But in Trump's words, the children will continue to tussle. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
Today's other headlines start with a string of unanimous decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court. For one, the justices ruled that Mexico cannot pursue a $10 billion lawsuit against U.S. gun manufacturers for allegedly fueling cartel violence. U.S. laws have largely shielded gun makers from liability when their firearms are used in crimes. The justices also agreed that a Catholic charity in Wisconsin should not have to pay state unemployment taxes while other faith groups were exempted. The group said that was a violation of its First Amendment rights. A third decision made it easier to claim so-called reverse discrimination in the workplace. That case centered on an Ohio woman who claimed she was passed over for positions and even demoted because she is straight. President Trump says trade talks between the world's two biggest economies will resume following weeks of rising tensions. That comes after Mr. Trump held what he called a very good phone call with Chinese leader Xi Jinping earlier today. In a social media post, Trump said Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and Trade Representative Jameson Greer will represent the U.S. at the talks. The date and location have yet to be determined. The two sides aim to make progress on tariffs and rare earth minerals after prior negotiations stalled last month. Former President Joe Biden is dismissing President Trump's call for an inquiry into his alleged cognitive decline, calling it a distraction. Last night, Mr. Trump called on his Attorney General Pam Bondi and other officials to investigate Biden's use of the auto pen and whether certain individuals lied about his health to unconstitutionally exercise the authorities and responsibilities of the president. In a statement provided to the NewsHour, Biden said in part, "I made the decisions during my presidency. Any suggestion that I didn't is ridiculous and false." In Massachusetts, a high school student who was arrested by immigration officials while on his way to volleyball practice is now free. Earlier today, an immigration judge had ordered Marcelo Gomez da Silva released on a $2,000 bond.
Release Marcelo Gomez now! Release Marcelo Gomez now!
Public support for the 18-year-old had been growing steadily since his arrest last weekend. Authorities said they were actually looking for the teenager's father, who owns the car his son was driving when he was detained. Following his release, Gomez da Silva described what happened when an officer confronted him.
He gave me no reason to stop me, no reason for a traffic stop, nothing. And apparently they say they're trying to get my dad, but I'm here, like not my dad, so that doesn't make sense.
Gomez da Silva came to the U.S. from Brazil when he was 7 on a tourist visa. He was later issued a student visa, which has since lapsed. In the Middle East, Israel said today it recovered the bodies of 2 Israeli-American hostages who were kidnapped in Hamas's October 7th attack. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the military brought the remains of Judy Weinstein and Gad Haggai back to Israel after a special operation in Gaza overnight. Meantime, Gaza health officials say Israeli airstrikes today killed at least 13 people, including 3 journalists who were struck in the courtyard of a hospital. The Israeli military said it targeted a militant operating there. And in southern Gaza, aid distribution resumed today at 2 sites run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The group shut its locations yesterday following several fatal shootings near its operations. Turning now to New Zealand, where Parliament suspended 3 Maori lawmakers today over a traditional dance they performed to protest a contentious bill. A majority of members voted for the temporary removals today, saying the lawmakers acted in a potentially intimidating manner. The suspensions range from 7 to 21 days, longer than any prior ban. Last November, the lawmakers performed the dance called the haka as a form of protest to a now defeated bill they said would have reversed Indigenous rights. Today brought the launch of the highly anticipated Nintendo Switch 2.
Waiting for the Nintendo Switch 2!
It's Nintendo. I'm ride or die.
Eager customers like these in New York waited for hours with lines sometimes wrapping around the block. The second Switch is similar to its 8-year-old predecessor, but it has a larger screen and improved graphics. The industry has been looking for a shot in the arm amid slowing growth and widespread layoffs. On Wall Street today, stocks slipped ahead of tomorrow's highly anticipated jobs report. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell around 100 points. The Nasdaq gave back around 160 points on the day. The S&P 500 also closed in negative territory. Still to come on the NewsHour, how President Trump's budget bill could add trillions to the national debt. Plus, we hear from one Republican senator who's pledged to oppose the bill in its current form.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
Republicans in Congress are hashing out a new tax cut and spending bill that's projected to add trillions to the national debt. We'll get to some of those specifics in just a moment.
But first, let's take a step back and explain a bit more about our already ballooning national debt, how we got here, and what it means for our economy and future generations. Here's economics correspondent Paul Solman.
When we were there the other day, the debt clock that's been in Manhattan since 1989 said our country owed $35,903,414 million. The number's the total of every dollar the U.S. government has borrowed to cover the difference between what it spends and the revenue it collects. That collective debt has long fueled anxiety about how it will burden future generations. Take this ad, which appeared on TV a few years before the clock went up. Time so long ago that it's barely video-worthy.
You owe the United States government, in round numbers, $50,000.
The estimated projection for a baby born today, 4 times as much. Scary?
The size and the sort of trajectory of our fiscal path is making a lot of people understandably nervous.
To cover the gap between what the government spends and what it collects, we sell IOUs, call them bonds. About a fifth of our debt is held by different parts of the government itself, while the rest is held by the public, which includes foreign governments, investors, and folks like you and me. We rely on this debt to help fund the government. In 2024, that included about $4 trillion on benefit programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and nearly $2 trillion on defense and basically everything else. In all, the U.S. spent $1.8 trillion more than it took in, contributing to a national debt that we've been building on and off since the country's founding.
Welcome to the present. We're running a real nation.
Before he was a Broadway star, our first Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, called the young nation's debt the price of liberty, and in the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, advocated for the federal government to take over state debts to cement the colonies into the United States.
If we assume the debts the union gets, the new line of credit, a financial diuretic, how do you not get it?
The pace of borrowing has ebbed and flowed, with peaks due mostly to wartime spending, though generally the borrowing ebbed after a crisis was over. But in the aftermath of spending on the war on poverty and Vietnam back in the 1970s, spending again started to rise and hasn't stopped.
Our debt relative to our income has doubled in the last 20 years. It has quadrupled since 1980. We borrow very promiscuously, particularly during the financial crisis and during the pandemic. In fact, as things stand now, we owe about as much as all the other large advanced economies put together.
But what's been happening lately?
Our society is becoming older, and so more people are Social Security beneficiaries and are getting their Social Security checks. And we haven't scaled up our revenue collection in ways that match that.
And there have also been tax cuts, including during President Trump's first administration in 2017.
It's the largest tax cut in the history of our country.
Those cuts cost about $1.9 trillion over just a decade.
Tax reform, or cutting taxes, cutting the revenues that we collect without raising commensurate revenue to be able to cover the cost of that lower tax burden. And the result is we have every year higher deficits.
So the yearly deficits pile up and keep the total debt swelling. But so what? Today our debt is approaching levels not seen since the end of World War II. And at least so far, our economy sure hasn't collapsed. Far from it.
If we have problems, we could have another pandemic, we could have a financial crisis, God forbid, we could have a war of some type, and we will want to borrow a lot. And the fact our debt is starting so high, it's a risk. It gives us less flexibility for dealing with these things.
Economists say we've gotten a pass because the dollar is the reserve currency, meaning it's the most widely used currency in the world. But that dominance could be slipping.
Everybody sees, even if we don't, that we are likely to have a problem. And it's not the end of the dollar. It's not going to collapse. But maybe they want to be a little more diversified. Maybe they want to do other things. That further pushes up our interest rates. That makes it more painful. And we're in the thick of this right now.
Look, our IOUs are not free. We pay interest. And the rate on it has been rising. In fact, interest is the fastest growing part of the federal budget pie, making up about 13% of spending in 2024. That's more than we spent on defense. And the interest pie slice is more than twice what it was just 3 years before.
It's not just that deficits are going to rise and debt levels are going to be higher. What I actually worry about is what it crowds out in the future, because I think that's going to constrain you from things like investing in future generations and children and early childhood education, or dealing with the climate crisis that faces us today.
But our debt hasn't stopped investors from buying it, and the idea that the U.S. would stop paying entirely and default seems pretty unlikely. On the other hand, defaults have happened in other countries throughout history, and recently after the financial crisis.
We've seen sovereign debt crises across Europe, where questions about the viability of debt in countries like Greece were raised, and the sort of drag on those countries, not from just those moments, but from what drawing into question your integrity and your security and stability as a place to lend, really what that means to the economy. And these aren't short-lived impacts.
In Greece, a budget crisis forced the government to cut spending and raise taxes, contracting the economy. Unemployment reached 27% in 2013. It's a crisis that took years for the country to recover from. So, is the U.S. nearing the point that it can't pay its debts?
We're not going to literally tell them that we're not going to pay the debt, but there's, of course, a threat of inflation, which makes the debt worth less. You get paid back in dollars that don't buy as much as when you lent them. By the way, that just happened with the excess inflation that we had in the post-COVID years.
And if our dollars are worth less, the interest lenders would demand to buy our new IOUs would go up, and the more we'd have to borrow to pay the interest.
That interest rate won't just be the interest rate that the government owes people who lend to us. It will also trickle down to be the interest rate that you have to pay on your mortgage, or the interest rate on your car loan, or on your student debt. And all of that matters to households in a way that I suspect we're going to start to feel, and we're already really feeling differently now than a decade ago.
So the future of our debt really matters. And how much debt we're about to add is being determined in Congress right now. For the PBS NewsHour, Paul Solman.
From how the debt works to the debate over it right now, to look at what President Trump's budget bill, which he calls the big, beautiful bill, means for the U.S. debt. Congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins joins us now from the superscreen to explain it all. So, Lisa, if this passes, it would be the largest bill in dollar terms in U.S. history. Just kick us off with what the money involved is here.
Right. For Republicans, this is part of answering what they see as a potential crisis, the end of the Trump tax cuts. The question is this something that adds to a different potential crisis, an American debt crisis? So let's look at the money flow in this bill, and let's start with the tax cuts. First of all, Republicans are, in fact, adding some new tax cuts here. Those are the no taxes on tips, overtime, some benefits for seniors. These tax cuts are significant. However, they pale in comparison to the biggest cost in the bill. That is extending those Trump tax cuts. Altogether, the Congressional Budget Office says the tax cuts in this bill add up to $3.7 trillion. That's good news in that that's money taxpayers could keep, but it's also bad news because it comes out of the federal budget and potentially could add to deficits. So, did Republicans pay for this in the bill? According to CBO, no. The money saved in this bill from the cuts, the spending cuts, is $1.3 trillion. Now, this is a significant, historically large number of spending cuts. Healthcare cuts, we've been talking about Medicaid, green energy, student loans. This is a big number, but it is much smaller than the amount being spent here. So overall, Congressional Budget Office says this bill would add $2.4 trillion to the deficit, and that is even before you consider interest costs.
So, Lisa, Republicans argue that economic growth will help to pay for some of this, which is harder to forecast. But based on what we do know right now, what's their argument for why this won't add to the deficit?
Right, it's important because you're going to be hearing this from that. Republicans say, look at this biggest cost here, the extension of the Trump tax cuts. They say because these are the current tax rates, they argue it shouldn't be counted against the cost of the bill. So let's just go down this road with them for a second. If you take out the cost of extending the tax cuts, then indeed the math flips. And the money they're saving in this bill is more than what they're spending. So it would, in fact, be good for the deficit. However, this ignores the reality that this bill would, in fact, take all of this revenue out of the federal budget. It is significant in dollar terms. But this is also significant politically, and I'm going to explain to you why. Republicans want to pass this bill through something called budget reconciliation. To do that, they have to meet certain rules. One of them, they need a majority vote. That's what they want to get this through. But they also have to have a budget effect. That's clearly in here. But also, one of the rules is they can't increase the deficit over 10 years. So this argument that you take out the current Trump tax cuts is important politically as well.
Lisa, we saw Paul Solomon there take us through a big picture look at the debt. But what exactly does the trajectory look like right now? And also, what does it look like if this mega bill passes?
This is so important. Our debt right now is soaring. This is where we are currently. Right now, about 100% of GDP is where our debt is. And this is sort of the rough trajectory going up to 156% if we stay on our current track in the middle of this century. Here's what this bill would do according to the Congressional Budget Office. It would make this curve even more steep for the first few years, and then it would flatten out. Essentially, it just increases the debt curve, moves it up so we have an even higher percentage of debt to GDP.
Lisa, all the efforts we've seen from the president and Elon Musk to cut the size of government and government spending, how do those compare with the size of the deficit?
Right, it's so important. We've seen so much about this idea of cutting spending, cutting federal workers. But let's talk about what it actually means relatively. So here is our current deficit. I took the liberty of taking the $1.9 trillion, which is this year's deficit, and making it sort of visual so that each of these dots represents $10 billion. Elon Musk and Doge have said so far that they have saved $180 billion. Now, we know this is not verified, and we know some of it is actually unproven. But let's just go ahead and imagine that they did actually save $180 billion. Where does that compare? Look at that. It is just this much out of the entire deficit. They've also been firing federal workers. Now, let's talk about if you fired every single federal worker, it'd be about $270 billion that you would save. What does that get you? Just this much. One last thing, there's a rescissions package of immediate cuts that President Trump has put forth. We've talked about that. That would include the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. How much would that save? $10 billion, just one dot. So it's to say that as much as President Trump is trying to cut some spending, it really doesn't do that much to the deficit, at least not so far.
All right, Lisa Desjardins, thanks as always.
Welcome.
Several key Republican lawmakers share the concern about the impact the budget bill will have on the national debt.
Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson is among them, and I spoke with him earlier today. Senator Johnson, welcome back to the NewsHour.
Thanks for having me on.
You have called this bill immoral. You've said it's grotesque. Strong language. What specifically do you find so offensive about it?
No, that's not how I refer to the bill. I've referred to the fact that we are mortgaging our children's future as immoral and grotesque, and then the level of debt that we've accumulated and that we continue to accumulate. So that is immoral. What we are doing to our children, how we are robbing them of the opportunities and diminishing their prospects, that's truly immoral, and we need to recognize that fact, and we need to stop it.
Well, the Congressional Budget Office, as you well know, now estimates this bill would add $2.4 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. The White House says that number is misleading, and they say that you have your facts wrong. Here's what the press secretary said earlier this week.
But Republicans like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul disagree. They are saying that it will add to the deficit. That is their concern. Is the White House's position that those two Republican senators are, quote, blatantly wrong?
It is. Those senators, it's not news that they disagree with this president on policy, and the president has vocally called them out for it and for their not having their facts together.
So respond to that, if you will.
Well, first of all, I met with the president of the White House yesterday with his economic advisors. They know I have my facts straight. We've got a lot of respect for each other. Now, I thought what was kind of interesting in that White House meeting, one of the things that President Trump pointed out was, the Democrats are always unified. They're always united. And I pointed out to him, well, that's because they're doing the easy things. That they're spending money we don't have. They're mortgaging our children's future. We're trying to do something hard. And I think the good news is those of us who are trying to do something hard, we do respect each other. Listen, I'm a big supporter of President Trump. I respect Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune and Chairman Crapo. But we are trying to do something very hard. We have had an unprecedented level of spending increase since the start of COVID, from $4.4 trillion to $7 trillion. Our deficits under Biden and the Democrats average $1.9 trillion per year. It's very difficult to dial that back. But again, we're trying to do it. I recognize and I sympathize how difficult this is in the House, even in the Senate. I realize I'm kind of not one of the easiest gets here. But again, my loyalty is to my children and grandchildren. I believe that is shared by the president and by the other leaders who are working on this enormously challenging problem.
So what needs to happen to get you to yes?
Well, I've been pretty honest about this and up front. We need a commitment. I need a commitment to a reasonable pre-pandemic level of spending. Don't expect that to happen overnight. And a process to achieve and maintain it. So that gives people pretty wide latitude to satisfy what I'm trying to do. But the problem is severe. We're starting, according to the CBO projection, and that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not real fond of the CBO scores either. They're static, they're not dynamic, but their projection is pretty solid. I think you have to look at that. They're projecting $22 trillion of deficits over the next 10 years. That's an average of 2.2, starts about 1.9 trillion up to about 2.5 trillion. It's completely unacceptable. We need to bend that deficit curve down toward a trajectory where we can balance our budget. But again, that's a hard thing to do, but I just need a commitment to that pre-pandemic level, and I want a process and a commitment to work with me to achieve that over the next few years.
President Trump and Speaker Johnson have set a July 4th deadline to pass this bill. It's only a few weeks away. Is that timeline realistic? And what would potentially happen if you don't meet that deadline?
Well, I think the skinnier we make this bill, the more realistic that timeline is. It's kind of hard to predict. I do believe that people like Senator Rick Scott, Mike Lee are working on different components with the chairman of the committees. I think the bill actually will become better in the Senate. I think we'll find additional spending reductions, help us solve that problem a little bit better. And again, I'm working with the White House economic advisors, who are just a first-class and very knowledgeable group of people. We want to get our numbers straight so that nobody's disputing what the projections are, what the scores are, so we're all on the same page from that standpoint, and then we'll move forward from that point.
Before we let you go, I want to ask you about a separate development, because President Trump today defended the executive order he signed last night imposing travel restrictions on more than a dozen countries, most of them in the Middle East and Africa. Do you support that move, and do you think that policy is necessary right now?
I certainly support keeping America safe. Unfortunately, in the last administration, President Biden and his allies and Democratic allies here in the House and Senate threw open our borders, allowing millions of people completely unvetted, members of transnational criminal organizations, violent gangs, drug, human, sex traffickers into this country. President Trump has to clean up an enormous mess, and he's trying to prevent that mess from becoming even bigger. So, by and large, I support his actions. We have to secure our border. We have to protect Americans, make sure that Americans are kept safe.
Senator Ron Johnson, thanks for your time this evening.
Have a great night.
And we'll be back shortly with a look at some of this year's inspiring graduation speeches.
But first, take a moment to hear from your local PBS station. It's a chance to offer your support, which helps to keep programs like the NewsHour on the air. For those of you staying with us, we return now to a new development in the suburb of Tempe, Arizona, that's providing a blueprint for more environmentally friendly and car-free driving.
Stephanie Tsai has this Encore report.
The vast suburbs of Phoenix make driving a necessity for most people who live here. There's not a drop of asphalt in the project.
But developer Ryan Johnson, who grew up in the area, has a different vision for its future. And it starts with this apartment complex in the city of Tempe.
It's a 1,000-person neighborhood where it's the first car-free neighborhood built from scratch in the U.S.
Car-free meaning no parking spaces for the more than 300 residents.
I love it so far. It's done wonders for my lifestyle.
Raven Ross, a full-time artist, moved to Cul-de-sac last February. When residents sign a lease, they agree to not keep a car at the property.
So how has it been being without a car?
I take public transit now, so sometimes my bus stop can be like a 13-minute walk or it can just be a 2-minute walk. So just having that walking time every day that I probably wouldn't normally get if I had a car has been a benefit.
The savings from not having a car can be up to $1,000 a month, and Ross has lost 25 pounds since moving here. Araceli Delgadillo and her family are big on bikes. Even the 5-year-old rides.
How do you take a watermelon back from the grocery store on a bike?
Actually, well, I don't think we've tried that yet. Just the little ones, but not the super big ones. But we have a cargo bike for that now, so probably would work.
She and her husband sold their cars and home to move to Cul-de-sac last July.
We used to have to commute 26 miles every day, twice a day, 5 times a week. It was just so rough on me. So I'd always sit in the passenger and I'd look around and I'd just see everybody kind of like a zombie. There we go. Nice.
Now she bikes or takes the light rail to get her and her son Leandro to and from Arizona State University during the week. They've given themselves a year to see if a car-free lifestyle is sustainable, relying on the rentable e-cars that Cul-de-sac provides on site to visit family on the weekends.
I just enjoy being outside more and making it part of my day versus being stuck in the car for those hours and then just getting home and being too tired to do anything.
The city of Tempe's existing infrastructure is what makes developments like Cul-de-sac possible. There's already a mix of public transportation, bike lanes, and wide sidewalks friendly to walkers that makes car-free or at least car-light living possible.
We've separated the bike lane from the road here, added plants, tried to add shade.
Eric Iverson is their Director of Transportation and Sustainability for Tempe.
We've been a little bit on the leading edge of how you urbanize and grow a city in this region. Many cities, especially the ones that are kind of in the older parts of the valley, have been confronting this too, and seeing that density and maybe a car-free lifestyle is an attractive option for many people.
One of the keys to car-free development is actually parking-free development, says David King, a professor of urban planning at ASU and a former student of Donald Shoup. While at UCLA, Shoup wrote the groundbreaking 2005 book, The High Cost of Free Parking.
Parking, as Donald Shoup says, a fertility drug for cars.
He explains the basic thesis.
What cities do is that they require a certain amount of parking for everything that's built. So if you build an office or an office building, you have to supply something around 3 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of office space. Or if you're building an apartment complex, you have to supply 1 or 2 parking places for every unit that you're building. So with all this parking that's required for everything that we do, parking becomes ubiquitous, it's free, and we all expect free parking everywhere we go. And because of that, we all drive everywhere.
The parking requirement started in earnest before World War II, and by the 1950s had become commonplace in American urban planning. The result in Phoenix is not only sprawl, but heat. Climate change has led to record-breaking summers in the Valley of the Sun.
One of the reasons that Phoenix is continuing to get hotter and hotter, especially in the summer months, it's the overnight temperatures that are really rising. And a lot of that is heat that's trapped in our roads and our parking lots that is just being released overnight.
With a mind toward climate change and sustainable development, Tempe's parking policies are evolving.
So we've reduced our parking requirements, especially if you're attached to a major public transit route, for example. We've made it easier to have less parking. We've also made our buildings face a street, face the pedestrian environment, face public transit, rather than having a building separated by a large parking lot from the street.
Developer Ryan Johnson is also a Shoup-inspired urbanist, generally averse to parking, although there is a lot on his complex reserved for retail customers.
What's interesting is if you ask people to visualize what the heat of Phoenix is, it's not 100 or 110. It's when they went to the grocery store, they walk back to their car in an asphalt parking lot that's got the greenhouse gas effect, and they walk in, it's not 110, it's 175, and they might burn themselves on the seat buckle.
When he was conceiving of cul-de-sac, Johnson sought ways to bring down the heat. The desert adaptive architectural style is meant to make it feel 15 or more degrees cooler in the apartment complex. The overall vibe feels European, with walkable pathways and a plaza with dining and shopping.
It's better to build walkable neighborhoods. It's better for climate, it's better for health, it's better for happiness, it's better for low cost of living, it's better for low cost of government. It's a better way to build cities, and it makes for a better life.
Whether the concept can be replicated elsewhere and whether there is political will to is an open question. For now, cul-de-sac is a tiny oasis in a vast desert of suburban sprawl. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Tsai in Tempe, Arizona.
As we showed last night, commencement speakers across the country are passing on key advice to the class of 2025, sharing their recipes for success and life lessons learned.
And we wanted to take another moment to reflect on the words of wisdom being passed down to the next generation of leaders.
I dropped out of law school. This was also kind of mortifying in its way. It was Harvard, which I am not saying to sound like a jerk, but to help you imagine how bad it looked to my parents and to a lot of others as well. But that was the moment I became the author of my own life. I've been a journalist for a quarter century now. Not a day has passed when my field has not been in existential and business crisis. And I'm happy.
In 2007, I signed to run track and field here at the University of Georgia, following in my parents' footsteps as athletes at this great institution. Shortly after signing day, I found myself in an operating room with little hope of ever walking again. As I'm sitting in a doctor's office facing one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had. Continue living my life in pain, or consider having my leg amputated. In that moment, something clicked. I stopped letting the reality of my present circumstances dictate the potential of my future. Today, 15 years post-amputation, I stand before you as a 2-time Paralympic medalist, 3-time world champion, and 4-time world record holder. Thank you.
If you remember nothing else I say today, remember these 3 things, please. Number 1, run your own route. Everybody's path is different. Stay focused on yours. Comparison kills potential faster than failure ever could. Number 2, watch the film on yourself. Be real about your flaws. Own them. Grow from them. Self-awareness is a form of leadership. And number 3, think bigger than today. Everybody wants quick wins. Everybody wants to go viral. I'm sorry to tell you, social media is not real. Class of 2025, this is your kickoff. You're stepping into a new season. You're holding the ball. Ole Miss gave you the playbook. Now it's your job to call the plays and lead the drive. So whatever you're chasing, chase it with humility.
My career arrived overnight. It's this Cinderella story of a video. Maybe you've seen it, maybe it was force-fed to you. If you haven't seen it, I play a song for Pharrell Williams. He really likes it. His reaction goes on YouTube. Ta-da, I'm famous. But no one saw all the hard work or all the times I almost quit. They never heard the songs that didn't work or the shows that were just bad. I don't know any artist that hasn't considered quitting. But you didn't get here because you wanted to do something easy. You got here because you wanted to do something great.
You have to turn your attention to you when moments get tough. There will be challenges, but how you respond, it's all up to you. I was chosen for this assignment, and so are you. You won't be perfect. Perfection is the perfect lie. You will make mistakes, and that's okay. As the Geechees from the Gullah Islands say, take care of the root to heal the tree. And the tree is all of us, y'all, because humans need humans.
And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Amna Nawaz.
And I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, thanks for spending part of your evening with us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
a successful business owner sells his company and restores his father's historic jazz club with his son. A Raymond James financial advisor gets to know you, your passions, and the way you bring people together. Life well planned.
the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour, including Leonard and Norma Chlorfine, and the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.